Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
147 episodes in, and we have a first on Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing as we go down the rabbit hole of sober living homes. We're going to talk about giving back and investing with sober living homes. You're going to learn literally everything. I learned so much on this episode with my guest, Devana Came. Let's go. This is episode 147 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Devana Came. Devana is a real estate investor and sober living home expert. We're going to talk all about it. Devana, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is our first sober living show, so I'm really excited to get into it with you. But one thing I want to start with before we get into how you got into real estate and all that is sober living has become something of a buzzword. We were talking a little bit on the pre-call. Tell us a little bit how you are doing sober living is different than what people might be buzzing about.
Yeah, so there's two basically different ways. You can be an owner-operator, or you can arbitrage your house out to an organization that then creates a sober living.
I mean, that doesn't even sound like really sober living. That just sounds like arbitrage.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that there is positives to it, a few positives, but some also pros and cons, I guess you can say. The pro is that you're still providing a house for people who need it.
Yeah, of course.
You're very separated from the sober living. It's really no different than arbitraging your house to anybody who's going to go do something with your house, whatever that may be, sober living or other things. So yeah, it's very different than owning and operating.
Yeah. I mean, in your experience, are there some sober living homes that used to try to kind of hack it because I have a story.
Yeah.
So I had a short-term rental with my sister in California. Guy seemed fine. He wanted to rent it for 6 months. And we're like, oh, sure, no problem. It was kind of like a down season. And then we started getting like rampant calls from the HOA because it was HOA development. I'm like, what is going on? My sister's calling me. And it's like, it turns out that it wasn't sober living. They were doing a rehab, like kind of like a modified community rehab there. So unfortunately we did have to remove them because they faked us out. We didn't know. But have you ever heard of that? Because that seems kind of a crazy thing to try to sneak into an HOA development.
Yeah, I think I guess my advice to people is if you're going to arbitrage a house from anyone doing sober living, be upfront about it because the landlord's going to get all kinds of calls. You're going to get, neighbors are going to wonder what's going on, and just be open and honest about what you're doing. And if the landlord says yes, you can arbitrage it. If they say no, move on to the next house. But I think a lot of people are afraid to tell a landlord that they want to do sober living in their house. Yeah. Because most landlords would, be like, wait, what do you mean you're going to have 20 people or 15 people living in my house?
Yeah.
But
But better than getting kicked out mid-month just because something else was happening. I mean, I understand it from both perspectives, but I think we'll find as we get into this conversation that you're doing it a lot differently. When was the first time that you were interested in just real estate in general?
I would say I bought my first house in 2014, but I started getting interested in it in maybe 2012. I started looking around. I was going to do like long-term rentals.
Was the idea for a supplementary income, or like what led you to real estate?
I think that growing up, my parents both, when I was younger, all the words weren't there with, cash flow and all that stuff. So my parents and my husband's parents had a lot of real estate stuff that they did, but I never really understood it all. But obviously subconsciously got, some stuff through what they were doing. Yeah. And then in 2014, I really wanted to get into something for supplement supplementary income. And my husband and I were driving down the freeway one day. He comes from, a home in Oregon on a farm and doesn't have a lot of background in addiction.
Yeah.
And I said, I want to buy a house and start a sober living. And he was like, okay. He had no idea what I was getting him into. No idea what that meant, but he was like, all right, let's do it.
Well, it is a noble pursuit. What made you think of that at that time?
So I grew up with a father who was an addict, a very successful functioning addict, which sometimes is dangerous in and of itself because they don't, not losing everything. So
that's a kind of like, what's the harm attitude, right? Hey, I'm functioning, I'm still making money, but that's not really the full scope of it.
Yeah. I mean, you're functioning until you're not functioning at some point. Right?
Yeah.
He was very good at making money. Everything he touched turned into money, but relationships suffered when there's addiction involved. And then I had some other family members that really struggled with addiction.
Yeah.
We have a lot of addiction actually in our family. And growing up, my grandmother actually had a sober living home.
Oh, wow.
And I knew about it. I had driven by it. I knew the concept, but I never really, asked a lot of questions or went to visit it a lot or anything like that. But I did know about them.
Yeah.
So then when I had family members that struggled with addiction, they then went to sober living after treatment. And I just started realizing, wow, these are not good homes. Like they didn't get taken care of. And the people that I knew that went to sober living homes went anywhere from like the really low end to like, the $6,000 or $7,000 bed Malibu homes. And they still weren't good homes because of the management and the ownership.
Yeah.
And so in 2007, I had somebody close to me die of a heroin overdose. And I was very angry at addiction at that point, and I wanted nothing to do with it. So I kind of had to have a come to Jesus meeting, I don't know, with myself and say like, you could either stay angry at this or you can do something to help. And looking back at the sober livings, I was like, I really want to get into real estate. So why can't I combine my love for real estate and helping people at the same time, but doing it way different and better than most people were doing at the time?
Yeah, I guess from an investor's point of view, one of the things that they're going to wonder is, how do you make money? And then two, I always say there are ways to do good, many, many ways. All of landlording is good, and you also want to make money. So let's talk about the actual financial implications of it, because I'm just guessing when you drove by, it was more of a noble pursuit. And then you had to figure out, wait, how is this actually profitable and also extremely helpful for the people who are going to get involved there?
Yeah. So I basically bed hack, which is renting per bed instead of per room or per house, right? So when you have 10 people in a house, you usually have a head of house who oversees things to make sure everything is going well at the house and that I can communicate with on a daily basis. So I don't count his bed, but so let's just say if I have a 10-person bed house, I'm making rent basically on 9 beds
instead of 3. Yeah. 3 bedrooms can be 6 beds or more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the general money making, but then there's obviously more wear and tear, more expenses that go on, and then the people staying there. So the underlying asset, though, of course, is the real estate, and that's what you bought first. How did you start to figure out how buying that asset, you had to kind of construct or maybe modify it a little bit to fit what you wanted to do?
Yep. So I'm really lucky because my husband is a general contractor.
Yeah, I've been watching. Yeah.
He does all kinds of handy stuff. We now are at the place in our life where our new house that we're building right now, we hired a general contractor. We just don't have the time to do all of it ourselves anymore. Yeah. So the first house I bought, I went in and I have a good eye for looking and saying, okay, I could close up this doorway and make this a bedroom. We can turn, add a bathroom onto here, or turn this little room into a bathroom. And he's the guy, I'm the visionary and I know exactly how I need it to be. And then he's like, just tell me what I need to do.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, here, close this wall up, have somebody do this. And I kind of pointed him in that direction. Yeah. And figured out the construction part. To be honest, the first house I did, I was very a rookie. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Yeah. I didn't even know if it was going to work or whatnot, but I was determined to make it work. And I just knew that if my heart was in the right place and I was helping people, I just felt like I just didn't ever have a doubt it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
So I put boots on the ground and figured out the construction. I didn't even know where I was going to get people to come into my house. I just did the construction and I just chugged away like one step at a time, and just it all fell into place.
Yeah. Well, based upon what you knew about it, I'm sure you knew that this was needed. Where you were going to find them was another story, but I think you probably knew they're going to come because people need this. There's just not a lot of, from what you said, there's not a lot of ones that are in good shape and that can really support what that is, leaving treatment and then having a little stay before you go back to living on your own for protection. That seems like a hard thing to find. So this is really something that can help. But you also have to figure out, how are you going to manage all these people who don't know each other living together? It's like doing college rentals, but with an extra, a little extra thing there that they're fighting against. So what was it like when you got the construction the way that you wanted? And we'll talk a little bit about what the differences need to be in terms of how you eventually started to find people for it.
Yeah. So let me back up just real quick. And I'd like to say, there's two different ways of coming at it. I know a lot of people nowadays, because of how real estate is with making money and cash flowing, it's getting harder and harder with real estate prices and interest rates and all that kind of stuff. So I want everybody to, from my perspective and from my heart, I want people not to get shiny object syndrome, but really, it's a strategy that can help so many people and make a lot of money at the same time. Yeah. If your heart's not in it 100% to also help people, I've seen so many people fail. Yeah. Because when the ups and downs come with different things, just the same with like short-term rentals. Yeah. You're going to be like, this is harder than I thought. I'm out. But if you're passionate about it, you ride those waves on any strategy that you choose to do. And you're going to be successful if you're coming at it with a balance of making money and helping people at the same time. Yeah. I think that goes to the owner operator part that you said before. I mean, you own the real estate, you own the business, you're trying to do everything to help them. And I think I can see why arbitrage you're very detached. You're buying the class of asset and having almost nothing to do with it, or just letting someone run in there, which is a different type of investment. So this makes sense. And I think actually a lot of harm could be done to potential people who are going to stay there if it's not going to be run the right way. So we are definitely both saying, don't get shiny object syndrome on this. It's not a fun asset to have. You have to really be set up to want to help people, or else this definitely is not the class for someone. Yeah. And some people, like what you're talking about with arbitrage, they just want to make a little bit extra money on their house every month than they would if they rented it to a normal family. Yeah. And I get that too. I totally see that. You're a little more passive. But for me personally, I love to know my people in my houses. I know everybody by name. I know their stories. Now, that doesn't mean that I have to be there every second of every day. I still have complete freedom and stuff in my life, but I still love the connective part to the people that are in my homes. But to get back to your question, the construction was done and I didn't really know. I just put my shoes on one day and said, I'm going to hit every rehab in the area and I'm going to just go walk in and introduce myself and tell them, what my house is about and invite them over for a tour. And I did. And they all came over and they're like, wow, this is something we haven't seen before, just color wise and different things. Yeah. A short story into that is there wasn't, bigger pockets. There wasn't any people on podcasts like yours that helped with explaining things back in those days, and not really even mentors, but other people that had sober livings. I met this one guy and he had a lot of houses and a lot of beds. And he said his one piece of advice to me was, don't do anything nice. They're going to thrash your house. Just paint your walls beige, get some thrift store furniture. Don't do anything nice. Your houses are going to get thrashed. And I was like, well, that sounds so depressing to me. Like, that's not why I'm doing this. So I went. That sounds like a strictly business point of view and not an owner operator point of view. Yeah. So I went completely the opposite. I did colors. I did artsy. I just like I would if I did like a short-term rental or something. Yeah. So when these rehabs walked into my house, it was something they hadn't seen before. So they were like, wait a second, what's going on here? And also my standard is I will not put anything to this day in one of my houses that I personally wouldn't use.
Yeah, I mean, I do see a correlation with short-term rentals. I also see like that this can be super uplifting if you're going to a temporary facility and it's all drab and shades of beige. I mean, look, they're fighting something to not go back to it. So if you're not giving them something that's on the upbeat, I think it's probably harder. I'm sure you have more experience in this than me, but are you finding that that actually helps the general overall mental state of the house in terms of like, hey, let's beat this. We're in this kind of hybrid where we've beaten recovery part, we've out of recovery, and now we have to get back to being on our own. But this is a big step in the middle where it goes wrong for a fair percentage of people. The way that you're furnishing them and making them more homey seems like it could play a big role in helping someone kind of stay on the path, barring other things that could come up.
I think it's just uplifting when you walk into the house instead of, and I'm not saying neutral colors aren't great. My new house is a little more neutrally than my others just because of the color scheme I had to go with cabinets and stuff, but still going to be very uplifting and light and airy. I think you're coming out of detox or rehab. You're already I don't want to say everybody comes out depressed because that's not the case, but they're coming out trying to reconstruct a life that they pretty much thrashed for lack of a better word, and coming into a place that is uplifting, bright, cheerful is going to help just the morale of the house over just a bunch of thrift store furniture. And again, I love thrift stores, but like if you're going to go buy a thrift store cabinet, I don't know, paint it, do something fun with it. Maybe, don't just stick a bunch of stuff that doesn't match in a house and call it good. Put your heart into it and they'll feel that. And it's going to result in longer stays, people wanting to be there when they see that your heart's into it, not just for the money.
Yeah. And I'd go back to something that I've always said about landlords, like slumlords always think the tenant's the problem, but the slumlord's the problem. When you rent somebody a home, any kind of home, and it looks terrible, they're not going to take care of it because it looks terrible. So from your point of view, when you make it feel more like home and it's nicer, they're more apt to take care of it. The opposite of the advice that you got, actually, that's what makes sense to me. If it's nice, no one's going to do anything. They don't want to mess it up. And they know they're kind of in this hybrid area where they're not ready to live on their own, or they can't, court ordered, however it works. And it's important that they do well in this stage for themselves and for all the relationships that they usually are still mending. And it's a nice, safe space. And I think I've watched, on your Instagram, and I can see that it doesn't look like what I would have thought of as sober living, which are kind of, boring old homes, I guess, of the ones that I've seen, and just kind of very drab, not really like, hospital-y, but just very nothing. Like bad short-term rentals that sit there and people are like, hey, I don't know why I'm winning. I'm not winning in today's society. It's like, well, you're up against somebody who has a pickleball court and you haven't changed the furniture in 30 years. So you're not gonna win. But do you feel like you're kind of on the cutting edge of this because it's not something that a lot of people know about? And I do think you have a valid worry of people getting in the space for the wrong reasons if they hear this. So we're going to try to detract them from that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've done this. I opened my first one in 2014 and I've, loved real estate ever since.
Yeah.
I stayed away from talking about it on my Instagram for a really long time because I'm so protective over people getting into this space for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And I'm just protective over the people that I house because I feel a responsibility with people's lives in my hands.
Yeah.
That are looking for a safe, clean place to live, a good house. So when I started hearing a lot of buzzwords and different things going on, I was like, I think I need to talk about it more because I want to educate people on the right way. Yeah. I don't know, right or wrong, whatever, but a positive way to do sober livings.
Yeah. I mean, I think now is the perfect time for that because I think there's so many people, there are plenty of people interested in investing for the wrong reasons, money only. They think everything's passive. Obviously, this is not a passive endeavor. But I also think we're at a time where there's a lot of people who are thinking auxiliary income. Later, I'd like to leave something, but I also would like to pair real estate and my passion. And this is a helping people thing. So if you're, someone who's been involved in social work or something and you want to get out of the grind of that, this is a great option. because you own the underlying real estate, which will appreciate. It can be repurposed back into something else later. But you're providing a huge service where, like you said, you know all the people there. I think that's important for being an owner operator. Like you said, you don't have to show up every single day. But if somebody says, hey, we had an issue with Tommy and Freddie, you know what's going on. So you, as the owner of the building, can decide, hey, do we need to make some adjustments where the beds are, things like that.
Yeah. And also going back to your previous comments about keeping up the house and stuff, I'm writing a book right now. And in my book, I talk about the broken window theory. And that's how, I don't know if you've ever heard about that theory, but that's how I take care of my houses. So when something's broken, when dish rags look dingy, and I think there was a post on my Instagram recently about, you don't want to put the money into your dish towels, but it's actually going to cost you more money in the long run by not putting the $10 into a new dish towel, because just the people you attract and how long they stay and all of that. Yeah.
I agree. For people who don't know, the broken windows theory was a New York City subway theory that if they just fixed all the broken windows, people would stop doing all the graffiti, and it actually worked right away, surprisingly. But this is a great analogy because it does make sense. And it goes back to what we were talking about, that if you make the product nicer for people, they're much more apt to take care of it. I always tell landlords, even like, how important do you think the exterior is for people if they're going to jobs and whatever real estate is, and you come back and the exterior is terrible? Even if the inside is okay, it's like you always come home to something that looks awful on the outside, dirty. That you're going to have an inherent bias and just not want to clean up the inside because you have to look at that and you know that the landlord or the owner is not cleaning that up. And that can go for the separate parts. Like if the kitchen's always dirty and you have 9 people in there, like they're not going to want to take care of it themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And so today I have my longest tenant that's been with me in these houses is 8 years.
Wow.
So my average is like 2 years is like a really good average right now where
that's so much longer than I would have thought.
Yeah. And then between 2 and 8 years, I have a huge span of people who have been with me for 2 to 8 years. And
do you know what the industry average is though? Because I bet it's like 60 days or something.
Yeah. It's like a couple weeks, a month, a few months, maybe up to 6 months.
Do you think that, I think that there's a differentiation, even though maybe they serve a similar purpose, between what's now called sober living and what used to be called halfway houses. Halfway house, half in, half out. You don't feel comfortable. Sober living is a way of life. It makes sense that this kind of rebrand of they're kind of the same thing, right?
Sober living is more for people who struggle with drugs and alcohol. Halfway houses are people who a lot of people coming out of prison.
Right. It could be either. Right.
It could be either. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. Just in terms of the configuration, going back on that, when you're buying a new property, first you're going to determine how many people can sleep in here based on the regulations of the town, right? And then you have to figure out where you can make modifications to add extra bathrooms and things like that when you can.
Yep. The code, I think it's national. I could be wrong, but NAR, so NARR, the National Association Recovery Residences, is like the national standard that I go by.
Yeah.
Some people don't, but I like to go by their standards. And that's no more than 6 people to a bathroom and 4 people to a refrigerator. So if you have a 3-bedroom house, you could technically have, 12 people in that house if you have the right configuration of bathrooms and things like that.
And it doesn't need to be a whole kitchen. It just needs to be a refrigerator separated. Do you need separate stoves and all of that also?
Nope. You just need a common kitchen and then extra refrigerators. So you can do that. In California, we have a lot of our garages are off of our kitchens. So we can have extra, refrigerators in the garages. If you have like a little breakfast nook in one of your houses, if you're back east or something, you can change that breakfast nook into your extra refrigerator room or things like that, just to make sure you have those extra.
Hey, it's Jonathan. On this brief interlude, I want to give you an update because our new website has launched. zenandtheartofrealestateinvesting.com is live and you can go there and check it out. I really want you to go check it out because we're going to still be upgrading more but it's going pretty well so far. This is a very guest-focused podcast website. Each guest has their own profile with their own links to our 10-minute clips on YouTube, and also links to the episode. You can search for guests using the alphabet, or you can search in the search bar. Soon we're going to have tags up as well so that you can search in certain categories: short-term rentals, mid-term rentals, syndicators, multifamily, and then you'll be able to link to the episodes on that. I have really put a lot of time into working with my team to get this website to be extremely visitor-friendly and very guest-friendly. I hope you enjoy it. At Zen and theartofrealestateinvesting.com, let's get back to the show. So for multifamily investors, I always say that one of the biggest challenges you have is to make sure that the tenants are happy and not arguing with each other, but they live in separate units. So tell us how important it is for you as somebody who's running a sober living home with, say, at least 10 people inside who generally don't know each other before they get there, some sleeping in the same room. How are you creating a flow of the house or anything in there that can help kind of minimize potential issues other than what we just talked about?
It's the $1 million question I get. Like, how do you do this? Because one of my biggest house right now is 20 people.
Wow.
My female house has 17 people. And the new house I'm building right now will have 24. So yeah, surprisingly, I don't have issues with getting along. But I would say the biggest part is the dynamic you bring as an owner with your management.
Yeah.
So just like anything, right? Management has got to be the biggest key part of running a house that size. So when you set up your dynamic with your managers, that's going to set the whole mood for the whole entire house. Also, nipping things in the bud really quick when things happen. Don't let things escalate. We are really good about mediating things. If somebody has a little issue with somebody, we come at it with like a holistic approach, not just like getting somebody in trouble for nothing. I want to hear everybody's side of the story. I don't really have to deal with that stuff. My managers do, but if it gets past something that they can deal with, I would step in. But they're really good about sitting down, listening to everybody, and having them hear each other, because most of the time it's people are mirrors for each other. They're not really mad at another person because the other person's a bad person. They triggered them on some level or different things like that. So we try to move in it from a holistic standpoint on how can we hear you guys? How can you guys hear each other? What needs to be worked out? And it pretty much gets worked out pretty quickly. I don't like drama, and I don't want to have drama in the houses as much as possible. So when I was building my houses, I went into every detail possible to mitigate those dramas. So we do have cameras in all of our common spaces, on refrigerators, so we don't have theft with people stealing food and all the little things that a lot of houses have. And then also we provide safes for each person. We do have, a key so we can check safe if we need to.
Safety, yes.
Yeah, we don't have theft in the house. We don't have a lot of the dramas that a lot of these other houses might have.
I think it's different when you put up cameras for everybody's safety, or if you put up cameras to be on surveillance, and I think the way that, like you said, the way that you set up the kind of holistic approach and how your staff deals with it is a big part of it. So let's talk about the staff a little from an investment point of view. These are paid staff members, or do you have some that are kind of live there for free and then are the house manager? How does that work? Because that plays into your overall potential cash flow as part of the investment end.
Yep. So what I will say about this, for me, I have my staff is employees now, W-2 employees. I think it's been done a certain way for a really long time. Things are changing. I would probably say, because every state is different, make sure that you look up your local employment laws. For each thing, because like in California, it depends on how you're structured. So let's say you're a peer run house, kind of like an Oxford house, which is what most people are arbitraging to. Mm-hmm. Theirs is a peer run democratic house. So they wouldn't need to have that. If you're a nonprofit, then you can have volunteers. If you're a management led house, you should have employees, and you can structure that in different ways, but definitely, talk to your lawyer, your employment lawyer, and set it up legally with your employment laws of your state.
Yeah, this seems like the type of thing you should be super buttoned up about instead of like, of course, you figured out a lot, but you seem like the type of person you still wanted to make sure everything was right as you were figured out. Because, like, if you have the wrong amount of beds, there's a reason why they have those numbers and the refrigerators in place. It's for the max benefit of the clients who are going to be there to hopefully diminish the potential disturbances from not having available bathrooms. You don't want 7 adults waiting for one bathroom. Like all of us with kids know that's, 2 is enough to complain about a bathroom. What are some of the hardest things about owning and running sober living as an owner operator?
The hardest thing is getting to know them and then having to either ask somebody to leave.
Yeah.
Or they leave on their own and then you find out later something happened, like they overdosed once they left, and you just had gotten to know these people. And that is truly a hard thing. That's the hardest thing for me.
But that's like, you definitely sign up for that and hope that it never happens. But being the vessel for people to succeed in is all you can do. I'm sure you've learned that by now. It's, you have the availability of something that wasn't open to them before. They'd have to be in something bad. And, we can't chase everybody's demons, but you're doing something that is giving the opportunity for people to succeed. And, that's laying it on the table and hopefully they do the work. But I can see that is always going to be the toughest part. So someone going into it has to know that's coming at some point, that you're going to find out that happened at some point, and it's going to be rough. It's what everybody else is doing against that. And, knowing that you can't control that part.
Yeah. I would also say the other hardest part would be NIMBYs. So dealing with neighbors that find out you're sober living, and in society, we have a stigma on addiction and what that looks like. And if you came to one of my houses, you would never know it's a sober living. If you drove by, you wouldn't know it's a sober living. That's the whole point of a quality sober living. You should never know that it's even a sober living. But I think the best way to deal with the NIMBYs are education and explaining to them, being communicative, giving your number to them if they have an issue.
Definitely.
All of that stuff. There's so many ways to handle a NIMBY. We've had a couple that in the beginning were like, oh my gosh, there's going to be all these people. I'm just explaining to them that this is going to be the cleanest house on the block. They're not even having a glass of wine at night. Like they're in curfew. It's going to be the quietest house on your whole entire block.
Right. There's no parties.
There's nothing going on.
Yeah.
And then now seeing those neighbors, they're giving high fives. The guys are helping them move their tools in because they're older. Their trash cans, like they've come to be really good neighbors.
Yeah. Those are really good things to think about, because I can just imagine myself, if my neighbor just came to me tomorrow and said, hey, I'm going to be doing a sober living, I'm moving out, I would be miffed. I mean, my daughter lives in the back. I would immediately think the worst. So I do think it's important to go explain it and know that, they can call you anytime if there's something there, because that makes it something. You're not doing anything illegal. Everything's by the book. You're trying to help people. That is a pursuit. But you as the owner have to understand the other point of view. Like, hey, I understand why you're worried. It's not what you think it's going to be. But that's really important. And another note for us to, skip the shiny object if this is something that you're not really passionate about, because it's a lot of work to take care of even the neighbors around there they do have valid concerns, because it's a lot of people, and it's people who just came from a facility. So, they think all the worst things they've watched on TV instead of, 8:00 bedtimes.
And I think that there are a lot of bad sober living homes that give us all a bad name.
Yeah, of course.
So my mission is to help people create quality sober living homes and change the narrative of bad sober living homes. So I sit on the board of the Sober Living Network and of the Sober Living Coalition in our area. And it's just a big, huge mission of mine to help people create good quality homes.
Yeah. I mean, another reason why it's so important for you to now be open about it on Instagram and show people, because then you also have verified other sober living homes that you can show new neighbors and say, here, just look at the website. Like, this isn't what you think. And now they can really see, your passion. I think that probably helps a lot. And you're right. Like in a lot of industries, there are people setting the pace that makes it harder for you to be good at. But you can only do that one by one and show people. I would think across the board, hopefully it helps things get better, but there's always going to be that subset who, are just looking at it as a turning beds type of thing. And, I don't think that's the best help for the people there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely been a journey. I've learned a lot of things in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many sober living beds and properties do you have now?
So I have 4 that are just directly sober livings. So 3 that are going right now, 2 male and 1 female. And then the new house should be opening by the end of June. And that will be my 4th, which will also be a male house. So I'll have 3 male houses and 1 female house with a total of 71 beds right now. And then eventually, hopefully in the next few months after it's opened with a little ADU, it'll be a few more beds after that. And then I have another piece of property that I'm going to be developing this year, which I'll build from the ground up, a really big sober living, and then add a couple other projects. My female house, we're going to add an ADU, and then a couple little things to some other houses to up our bed. So hopefully in the next 2 years, I will be at, 115, off the top of my head, over 100 beds. Yeah.
What's the goal for the ADUs? Is it just extra space, or is that like for the people who are kind of helping also? Because it seems like you get away from some of the other people. So maybe it's some type of benefit in there.
Yeah. So it is to add some extra beds without having to go buy a whole nother house. But the goal for us directly will be girls who have been in our house for a really long time that might not need as much oversight anymore. But they still will get drug tested and that, but maybe they don't need the curfew and a few other things that the girls inside the main house will need.
Yeah.
But still have the accountability of being on the same property.
Yeah. I like that. And are you excited about this new build? That's going to be something, because you can now really construct it for this. One, I'll get your answer on if you're excited, but then the last part is, since you're building it specifically to be sober living, what do you think that does to your value later? Like, can it be something else? So I'll get those, because I think that's an important thought.
Yeah, I think I'm constructing it that it could be something else. It doesn't have to just be sober living. We just recently built a ground up ADU in our backyard. It's about 1,200 square feet. And I use that. Big. I actually co-live that. So I rent that out by the room, but to traveling professionals as a midterm rental.
Great.
That's worked out amazing. I just like the co-living strategy. I think I'm so used to sober living. I can't imagine just renting something out to one person. It just doesn't.
Well, it must be nice though to have this separate little entity where there's no curfew and management involved. Like it's just a little bit more hands off. But how's that process been? And are you benefiting in California, because they have very helpful ADU laws everywhere in California?
Yeah, I love it because it's on my property, and I just like to also be involved. I can go over there and clean up a little bit if I want to. I love hospitality, so I want to make sure everything's always just perfect for my tenants, whether they're in sober living or midterm or my long term. So I love it. A lot of people are like, "You're crazy. It's on your property and there's bad people." But the way we designed it, they can't see in my backyard. I don't even see them. It's like having a neighbor, basically.
Yeah.
So it's worked out great for us. And I co-live that. So I have it set up very similar to my sober living home in how I have the rooms numbered and their cabinets numbered and all that. So it's a very easy process for them to keep everything organized. And it's worked out great doing the co-living situation with them.
That's probably really good for some travel professionals, whether they be nurses or something else. So they do get a little company, but they have their own all locked spaces that they can go. It's like a little bit of social activity that's potentially there, and a very low likelihood that it's going to be, bad, because they're generally doing the same things, working most of the time and then staying there.
Yeah, they work, they sleep, they're pretty much stay out of each other's hair. But I'll walk in there to do some stuff in the kitchen, and they're, eating together and talking together. It's nice. yeah, it's a cool strategy to do.
Yeah. So any designs to do any more of that outside of the sober living and just do more midterm professional rentals?
Possibly, but my heart is really with the sober living. So
Yeah.
the 3 builds I have this year are going to be for sober livings. And then, yeah, we'll see what ends up after that. But yeah, I keep, I think like everybody, you get kind of like, okay, I've like, my challenge is over. I know how I could open a sober living, with my eyes closed. What could I do next? And challenge me. But my heart keeps getting pulled back to the sober living arena.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're both hoping people take from this. If you do have a heartstring that's being pulled for that, that might be something that can be economically beneficial for you and also emotionally beneficial for you. But yeah, it's not going to be easy. And I think if they go into it with the right mindset, like you did, based on what you said about your background, you really like, we need this. I mean, it's definitely necessary. It's something that anyone who knows anything about what these places look like 20 years ago is just like unclean, non-sanitary, not run well, people not doing it for the right reason. So yeah, it's impressive. So where can people follow along to see more? I've of course been following on Instagram, and that is Devana Invests.
Yep.
And then
Devana Invest. My email is devana@thehouseofcourage.com if you need to get a hold of me.
And are all of your facilities named that, the House of Courage? Like all the ones that are all active? Yeah, I mean, that's another important thing to note too, because I think that is part of what you're putting out there. You're trying to get somebody back on their feet. You're naming the place with something that they can look forward to. You're furnishing the place where they can feel good about it. I mean, I don't think there's much more great that can be said about what you're doing than you have these people between 2 and 8 years. I was literally thinking like 60-day type of stay.
Yeah.
And so those people who've been there so long, if they've, repaired their relationship with their family, the family can come visit them, at certain times. Mm-hmm. That's a really big benefit. And I don't think that's what anybody would have thought, because I definitely would not have thought that.
Yeah. So it's also interesting too, just to skip back real quick on people's perception. They all think like, oh, you're housing drug addicts that are, that have all lived under a bridge somewhere shooting heroin or something. Like that's their perception.
Like that's the only people who get addictions. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I might not have some of those people as well, but I mean, people that live in my houses have been a lot of law enforcement's children. Mm. I have somebody who lives in my house right now who was a correctional officer his whole life, like stand-up job, like people, he was on the opposite end of what some of these people were. And he just has a huge heart. Like he's amazing to all these other guys as role models. There's people I know in this industry that live in houses that have had, just very upstanding jobs that our society would say, oh, they were, upstanding citizens. That addiction doesn't just affect a certain class. It affects everyone. It can affect somebody. I've had lawyers. I've had all kinds of people. And then I've also had the young kid who got into a bad situation with kids and, didn't go on the right path. It does not choose who it affects in terms of class or money or anything like that. It can hit everybody. So I would urge people, even if you don't want to do sober living, to try not to have just this closed-minded idea of who addiction affects, because it can be your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad, anybody. And they're really good people. They're probably the most sensitive people I've ever met. And life can get heavy for them and they turn to drugs and alcohol or a lot of trauma-based stuff. So it's been an amazing journey for me. I also think it's important for people to understand that aftercare is just as important as treatment. And a lot of people don't realize how much a good quality sober living will help somebody instead of going back into their old place of living.
Yeah.
If they're in a good quality sober living, what that can do for somebody's life. And the hard part you asked me for before was having to see somebody go out and maybe not make it. But the amazing part is to see most of them in my houses make it. And I have 2 guys right now that I did not know. I was going to pull my hair and I did not know what I was going to do with these guys. And they're both drug and alcohol counselors right now in rehabs, that when they came into my house, I was like, I don't know how, I just don't know what to do with them. Yeah. And they have become such amazing men and role models for other people. So if you have the heart to do it and you love real estate, it's an amazing thing to get into.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a cross section of doing good and being able to make money and not have the focus just be on that. Of course, it has to be profitable for you to keep doing it. And you figured out that structure. And I think that's really, well said, that the people who have their heart in the right place can do both things. I think that's, I mean, I've learned a lot on this. I definitely, I think over the years, I've learned a lot more to be more open-minded about things. So I came in with very open-minded, but I could see myself when I was younger or someone who just hasn't had much exposure thinking all of these things about a facility. But, hopefully you're part of changing that and letting people see like, hey, we're just providing, an opportunity for somebody to get back on their feet. And what we found from this conversation is they may stay on their feet there, but where do you want people? Do you want them in a nice environment or do you want them back on the streets? And that's why you were saying how important this sober living is. Because if you go right from treatment back to all of the friends that you were just with, like they're still doing the same things because they think they're fine. And this in the middle is exactly why it's called sober living. Nobody else can get in to disrupt that. So yeah, I think it's really amazing. And I'm excited for people to hear this episode when it comes out.
Yeah. And just to have a house that's a mutually supported environment with, like you said, 20 guys, how does it stay good? The I don't know the word to use, not the brotherhood, but I'm at a loss for words right now. The fellowship. Yeah. The fellowship that I see with these guys who stay in a house together and the support that they give each other is actually a really beautiful thing. And for my female house too, like it's an amazing thing to see the friendships and the connections and the support that they can come home when they have a bad day and somebody knows exactly what they're going through. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
They're all sober, which is obviously very important in that transitional phase to only be around people who are sober and not, trying not to be. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think this is going to be an eye opener for a lot of people. I really appreciate your time and I'm glad I got you on the show.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me anytime.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. That was Devana Came. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Wait, you have reached the end of the show. This is the part where you're going to get ready to check out, but I've actually changed this part. For over 120 episodes, you heard the same thing. Well, now I've changed it. I've thought about doing intros to the next episode, but I'm going to hold off on that for now. These are my pitches at the end. I've got nothing to sell you at all, but I do want to remind you that it really would help us if you support the podcast in the right way. All that means is subscribing to the podcast so you get it on Monday and Thursday, writing us a 5-star review if you believe that we deserve a 5-star review, sharing it with your friends, and being a participant in the Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing community. Soon there's going to be a new website launched. Maybe when you're listening to this, it's already going to be out there. That's where we're going to have collaboration. You're going to be able to see a lot from the guest. It is coming soon, and I just want to tell you, from me to you, I don't know how I got here, over 100 episodes. I'm so appreciative of you listening to the podcast and especially sticking around to hear this part. We'll see you next episode.